So hello, my name is Eric Figueroa. I am originally from New York City, and I've been working at 성균관 University for just over 10 years now. I teach writing and presentation in English in the spring and in the fall, but I also teach a course called Global Englishes, which is a course that's designed to teach students about all the different varieties of English that they can encounter in the world. So that's the newest course that I'm teaching right now. Since I've been teaching the same classes for 10 years, my philosophy about my goal has changed. Originally, I thought that the goal was just to make people better writers and public speakers. But I think the goal is a little bit more refined now to make them more critical writers and critical speakers. And what I mean by that is I'm much more interested now in the quality of the information they're giving rather than the style of their writing or their public speaking. And I think that that's something I didn't really focus on in the first few years, but it's really necessary for people to understand when they're communicating through writing or through public speaking that they really try to communicate and not just give information. So I think that my philosophy has kind of changed to that, to making sure that students recognize their whole purpose in doing these classes is not just to get a score, but it's also just to become better communicators and to really try to reach their audience well. When I first started teaching this course, there's so many ways you can teach a course, and I'm sure if you talk to professors, they'll give you the same kind of answers at the beginning. They did one thing, but they realized that they needed to go in a slightly different direction after having more experience doing the course, and also after seeing hundreds of students take the course and seeing where there are some problem areas. I think communication is one of the most difficult things for university students in Korea specifically. And I think the reason for that is not just because of the language barrier. I think honestly it has to do with the difference of education philosophy growing up in Korea. So one of the kind of things I usually say to my university students, I used to teach elementary school. I taught elementary school in Seoul for 4 years, and I taught at the same school, which was a wonderful experience because I was able to see my 3rd grade students become 4th graders, 5th graders, and 6th graders. And I saw them grow up. And I was really happy to teach elementary school students because they don't really have a fear when it comes to communicating. Even if they don't know how to say something, they do their best, they try because they're enthusiastic about it. But then when we get to university, I can ask a very simple question. I could say, which color is better, blue or red? A binary question, and nobody in the audience gives a response. And I think that that's kind of sad, because I always ask my university students, what happened to you between elementary school and university that you lost all of your ability to take a risk? You just are kind of trained to be quiet and just get input. So I think that's why communication is so important for university students. They have to reawaken this childlike fascination and curiosity that they lost when they were going through middle school and high school. I think a lot of it has to do with a big focus on testing as well. So that's really something that's kind of fed into my philosophy as far as what my goal is I want to make sure students recognize they do have the ability to communicate, but it has to be kind of pulled out of them because there's been such a dormant period in their life where they haven't had to communicate. When it comes to learning a language, I think people have to understand what actually languages are. And a language is not a subject in school. A language is a living, breathing skill. It's a skill, exactly that. It's kind of like if you want to be a good golfer, you have to put in the time. You have to go to the golf clubs, you have to go to training, you have to take lessons, you have to dedicate a lot of time to get good at that skill. Every language is like that. And the difference between golfing and language is much more complex. If you think about how many possible variables there are in speaking or writing, there's millions and millions and millions of possibilities. And when you first start to learn a language, you're going to make mistakes, and that's perfectly fine. But you need really a lot of input. You need so much time for your brain to catch all of the patterns of the language. And that's one of the reasons why I think a lot of students don't become very advanced in language, is because they just don't put in the time. It does take quite a lot of time. I've lived in Korea for almost 18 years. And just by saying that I've lived here for 18 years, you probably would say, oh, Eric speaks Korean very well because he's lived here a long time. But I'm in the same boat. Even though I live in Korea for such a long time, I don't actually have to use Korean that much in my daily life. And so I don't have as much input as, say, university students that come to Korea to study Korean, because every single day they are immersed in Korean culture, in Korean language, Korean music, they're having conversations. They develop their Korean ability very fast compared to me because they're actually using the language. So the best secret to learning English or any language is putting in lots of time actually using the language. Don't study it like a subject, because studying it like a subject is not going to help you to get better. Just knowing how grammar works doesn't mean you can actually use the grammar. The only way you can get good at grammar is by making lots of mistakes and actually just trying to use it. And with enough time, a few years of dedication, and also hopefully passion. If you are passionate about a language, like English, for example, if you like English music, movies, if you like having conversations in English, then you will develop very quickly. But if you don't find yourself having a lot of passion, you might want to reevaluate what your goals are with the language. I think a lot of times students are satisfied with just conversational ability, but they don't necessarily need to go beyond that. And that's perfectly fine. There's no reason why everyone in the world has to learn English to an advanced degree. You should just kind of be realistic about your expectations and your wants. If you really do want to excel though, you just have to put in the time. I didn't decide to be a professor. I kind of worked in that direction. My original goal when I was a university student, my first goal actually was I wanted to be a chemical engineer. And so I didn't want to be a teacher. I just wanted to work in science. I love science. I love the idea of making things, of doing research. But my experience studying chemistry and math and things like that, it just realized that there was a human element that was missing, so I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. At first I thought that, of course, I'm interested in technology and the sciences, that this is the right field for me. But I realized that even though I liked the concept of it, in practice, I wasn't enjoying myself as a student. So I actually changed my major to the humanities. I changed my major to English. So I was an English major in university, and that kind of guided me towards roles of using English through work, or for work. Because I grew up in New York City and I went to university in New York City, I was fortunate in the sense that lots of English majors who graduate university, they actually start working at publishing companies, because New York City is like the publishing headquarters of the United States. Lots of books or book publishers are based in New York. And so that was my goal originally, was to just start working at a publishing company. But right before I graduation, I was starting to look for work, and I started seeing opportunities for English majors, and one of them was obviously teaching in English. And at first when I saw that, I didn't really think of it seriously. I thought, oh, that's weird, okay. And I just kept looking for other possible roles. But I kept thinking about it. Because I grew up in New York City, I had the huge advantage, I think, of growing up with an experience, I should say, lots of different cultures. In my high school especially, there are people from so many different countries, and that made me curious about the world, because I was able to meet people and become friends with people from all over the world. So I was very curious about getting outside of New York and seeing some of these places. So that's what kind of made me think of doing English originally just for 1 year. That was my plan, just spend 1 year abroad and then come back and then go to do real work. So I did that. I came to Korea, actually. It was my first choice. I just want to give this background, because when I first came to Korea, it was not a popular choice as far as English education was concerned. A lot of times, even people who I knew in the United States that were interested in teaching English, they were thinking, why Korea? Why don't you go to, if you're going to go to Asia, why not Japan? Why not China? And so my reason for coming to Korea was because, to be honest, as I didn't have any Korean friends growing up, so I was curious about Korea because I knew the least about it at the time. And this is in 2003, a long time ago. When I decided to come to Korea, it was because I was interested in the language, I was interested in the history of the country, and I just wanted to see what it would be like to living in a place that I didn't know as much as other places. And I didn't have a kind of preconceived notion about Korea, so I came here. I had a hard first year working as an English teacher because I worked in a hagwon. But I worked, and then I decided my time is done, and I went back to America. I worked in a publishing company in California for a couple of years, but I really missed Korea. So I missed the lifestyle, I missed the food, I missed the friendships that I made, and so I decided to come again, but the second time was to teach in an elementary school, because I did not want to work in Hagwon. So my original goal was to come back for 2 years, and 2 years became 3 years, and then 3 years became 4 years. And I was having a really good time teaching elementary school students. I enjoyed teaching. I also, I think in my district, I don't want to say famous or anything, but I was well known in my district as one of the foreign teachers that was kind of known because we used to do open classes. Many teachers from our district would come to our school to see our English classes with me and my co-teachers. So they kind of encouraged me to do education as a career, even though at first I was just thinking education is okay just for short term, just to give me an opportunity to live in a different place and to just share my experience and my knowledge of English because of my major. But when I thought about it more, I decided that I wanted to pursue my master's degree, and so I did. I started studying the Soksa for 영어 교육. So I did that here in Korea, through an American university actually, but I did do that here. And then after I got my master's degree, right away I actually thought that I was going to teach at a university, but instead I taught at a graduate school for teachers. And so my first 2 years of teaching with my master's degree was actually not university. I was teaching English teachers who are Korean teachers that work in elementary, middle, and high schools. And so that was a very interesting experience because teaching teachers is very different from teaching students. They are quite demanding. They are very particular about the information you give them because they are teachers themselves, so they kind of know all the tricks, let's say. But I really enjoyed that experience. And the only reason I didn't stay doing teacher training is because it's quite volatile. If you know anything about teacher training, those are programs that are usually sponsored by the Ministry of Education, and their budgets change every year, and their decision or how many training programs they want, that changes too. It fluctuates. So it was very unstable, and that's why I decided to apply to work, and thankfully I was able to come to 성균관. And I really like this university. That's why I've been here 10 years. If I didn't like 성균관, I would not be here this long. But that's why eventually I fell into this program. But I think that's how life works for many people, is they have a goal at first, and then they work towards that goal, but they realize that they need to make some adjustments, go in a slightly different direction. So I've learned that the most important thing is not really reaching your goal, but having a goal that pulls you in a direction that will get you to a point where you're satisfied or happy with your life. That's something that kind of comes into my mind every once in a while because I used to work in a publishing company in California, and working in an office, working in a business, there are clear deadlines, there are clear project goals. Things start and things end, and you feel like you're making progress. So you know when you're making progress in those kinds of roles because you finish a project, you move on to the next project. In university life, the projects are classes, and classes begin and they end. But during the process of a semester, sometimes it's hard to know if you're making progress. And so, especially because in my role as a professor or a teacher, I'm just giving information to students. I'm trying to communicate with them, tell them what I think is important. But it's really up to them to take this information and develop themselves, right? I can only give them the information, answer their questions. They have to choose to develop themselves. So I think that's what makes teaching a little bit unique, is you really have to adjust your idea of what a project is, of what a goal is. It's not so much focused on me completing something, it's really focused on me helping others complete things or produce products or to, develop themselves. So the times that I feel that I am most successful is when I see the aha on students' faces. When I notice, I actually saw it right before this class. I was doing a class in presentation, and we're talking about writing arguments for persuasive presentations. And I could see the light bulb going off in the students' faces because I was explaining to them the things that work and that do not work. And they were getting it. I could see from their faces they really understood why we have to do a presentation in a certain way, why we have to make arguments the way they are. So when I'm able to come up with a good, easy, but important idea to share, and I see that the students are in agreement, that's when I feel worthwhile. The hard part is when it's kind of difficult to reach the audience to make them understand why something is important. And that happens a lot in education. You can't always have great days. There's good days and bad days as far as teaching is concerned. Some days I'm really exhausted and I feel like I didn't make any progress. Like the students don't understand or they don't think the information is that valid. But other days I can see very clearly on their face that, yeah, this is something that they are going to change about themselves, they're going to develop, and they're going to be better off for it. So I think there's a combination. I just have to hope for better days like that, but it's not a requirement. I just do my best. And I think as long as I keep my standards high for myself, but also for my students, then people will make progress. Every semester, I really do have impressive students, and I have to actually stop myself to remind myself that there are impressive students, because the day-to-day, you forget to do this. Like one of my I won't say it's a concern, but one of the things I regret is not telling those exceptional students you're really exceptional. Like I know it, but I feel like I should really express it more, because I think a lot of the students don't really know that they're exceptional. They don't. They just think that they're regular people, and what I mean by exceptional, it doesn't mean that they're like great at grades. Some of the exceptional students are not the best, highest scoring students. They're exceptional just because they think in a very amazing way. They have a great sense of humor. Like there's so many variables when it comes to that. When I say exceptional, they're just great people. A lot of students are afraid of public speaking. So one of my favorite things to do is to those students that express, oh, I'm really nervous. I'm happy that they express that they're nervous. That to me is really, it's brave to tell your professor, oh, I don't know if I can do this. I think a lot of students would rather hide their fear, but those students are exceptional. They tell me, I'm really scared, I'm really nervous. I like that, because then I can tell them, I can actually ask them, why are you nervous? And it's great when you ask them why they're nervous, they just say, because I have to present. And I'll say, so why are you nervous? When I keep asking them this question, then they get to a point where they realize that they are making themselves nervous. I'm not making them nervous. The class isn't really making themselves nervous. It's they themselves. They're thinking about the presentation. They're thinking they have to be perfect. And I explain all the time, there is no perfect. Just be yourself. Just be natural. It's okay to make mistakes. We're here to learn. We're here to practice. As long as you do your best, as long as you try to enjoy the hardship, accept the fear, you're going to be fine. And I'm always happy afterwards to talk to those students after their presentations. You can see the relief on their face. But I also know that they changed a little bit, because the next time they have to present, they're not going to be as afraid. They're going to realize it's not that scary. And so, yeah, I don't want to say that exceptional just means high scoring. Exceptional just means people that have the courage to want to change and the courage to show that they feel that they're not ready. That is exceptional to me.